Today on CityCast Denver, Mayor Mike Johnston is laying off almost 200 city staffers this week and eliminating hundreds of other positions in the first major layoffs at the city in more than 15 years. So I invited at-large City Council member Sarah Parody back on the show to explain what's really happening, what city services are going to be affected, and what's next. Plus, did Mayor Mike's homelessness work just lose a key partner? And a whole bunch of other contentious issues City Council's wrestling with. Today is Wednesday, August 20th. I'm Paul Caroli, and here's what Denver's talking about. All right, here we are. Sarah Parody, at-large council member. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be back.
Yeah, it's nice talking to you about this stuff. I mean, we got a lot of news happening in Denver right now, a lot of things in front of council that you've been working on, hot button issues. It's always nice to run through a bunch. I think we have to start with this big one, though. We've been hearing about it for months, and it's finally happened. This week, the mayor informed city staff about 171 layoffs and an overall reduction of 800 jobs, or 7.6% of Denver's workforce. This city has about 11,000 people working for it, to get a scale of what we're actually talking about now that we know. The big picture here is that revenues have been catching up slower than we expected after the pandemic, and the costs of running government are higher than ever. But what are you hearing this week with layoffs? What's the headline for you, Sarah?
Well, it's interesting. In a way, I'm glad that it wasn't more people. 171 I am really sad for each of those human beings and their families, and a lot of them had quite a bit of seniority with the city. And so I think there's people that are just reeling after yesterday and today. But I'm certainly glad that it wasn't more. The flip side of that is that, as you mentioned, we've now canceled 800 plus positions that had been held vacant for some time. And so what's interesting about that is that what you're more or less doing there is making a decision that because a job happened to be open, right, because someone left or it never was filled in the first place, we've now cut those positions, which I wonder a little bit if those are the most strategic positions to cut. But I'm also glad that those are, a vacant position being cut is a person that did not lose their job. So, right. So I understand the decision from that point of view.
Yeah, it seems to me that was the priority. Just in reading the tea leaves of how this is rolling out, that people losing their jobs was the number one thing that the mayor wanted to avoid happening. I mean, only 171. I think we were all expecting more. Yeah,
and I share that. I will say the other, if there's another headline, given that this is very much still happening, right? Like there's still people being laid off today. Apparently, it'll be over by the end of today, and there'll be more information coming for City Council and the public and the rest of our staff tomorrow. But from what I'm hearing, I just feel a little bit concerned that having changed the city seniority rules right when we did, which have been, seniority is like a feature of public employment. It's part of the reason that people stay in the public sector. And people really rely on that public sector retirement. They really, they think that if they stay in these jobs for a long time, that they'll get to retire from these jobs, and that's kind of the bargain. So having stripped that rule very unexpectedly, very quickly, and replaced it with what, in my view, is a very messy replacement rule, I'm worried that we're going to see a lot of people laid off who may have been critical of the mayor in the past, or who may have been sort of crosswise with their agency because of sort of having like blown the whistle or things like that. So sure. We'll see, but that's a little bit what I'm concerned about. Having framed this as, gosh, our hands are tied because of the budget, we have no choice but to do mass layoffs, and then end up firing a little bit over 150 people, starts to feel less like a response to a budget crisis and more like opportunism, perhaps.
Interesting. So you're kind of getting into some of the like possible political intrigue here about who's being laid off and these rules about. So what you're let me actually say specifically what you're referring to with the seniority thing is the fact that the mayor announced like maybe a month ago, and then they pushed through this rule change that would allow for these layoffs to happen to people based on a different formula, one that included things like merit rather than exclusively seniority, which
right.
is
They stripped seniority rights.
Well, no, it's still part of it. I think it's like 25%.
No, but it's not right. They stripped seniority rights.
But are you? What does that mean? Are you saying they
Well, it
stripped it?
means
Because I
that-
think it's still a factor.
Sure, but a factor isn't a right. There's a difference, right?
I
A
see
right
what
means
you're saying. You're saying a right. Okay.
yeah, layoffs. I mean, historically in the city, and people really counted on this. It would be like last in, first out, and layoffs would proceed in order of, if you're the newest person, then you would be the one at risk if it's a genuine layoff, and that is the difference between a layoff and a termination for cause, right? People could still be fired if they weren't performing, and so mingling those two things is a huge sea change to the expectations of our employees and to how public employment across this whole sector generally works.
Right.
Because again, if someone's not performing well, they can be terminated at any time. A layoff is a different thing, and seniority rights are sort of the bargain for the risk of layoffs because of public budgets fluctuating in the way that they do. So I feel, I don't know what the word is, but really dismayed, I guess, that we commingled those two things and then let go of a small enough number of people that, I guess I'm waiting a little bit to see who those people are.
Yeah, I think the mayor has talked about this. He would say we could chalk this up to his entrepreneurial streak. How startup. You're rolling your eyes as I say that.
Governments aren't companies.
Yeah, but I think citizens want governments to run efficiently. I think that's something that's appealing about the private sector versus the public sector is there's the profit motive that forces efficiency.
That is a myth, in my opinion. I don't see a huge lack of efficiency in our city departments, and I've spent a lot of a lot of my energy within the city drilling down into programs that I care about and trying to figure out what are they doing. But the thing is, we're not a profit-making machine. And so how do you measure efficiency if you're not actually here to make money, which we're not. We're here to serve the people of the city. So efficiency is really different. And it has a lot more to do with expertise, with caring, with soft skills, with commitment. And so if you look at, if you think about a lot of our agencies, like our human services agencies, how do you efficiently keep children and families connected? It just doesn't translate.
The one example that I think of, and it really gets back to your political point, is I was just reading in Denverite this morning about Scott Gilmore, the longtime assistant executive director in the Parks and Rec department, also happens to be husband of Stacy Gilmore, councilwoman for Montbello, up in Northeast, your colleague. They were, understandably very upset about him being laid off. But I know him because he was on the show before. He is the person at the Parks and Rec department, more than anyone else, who has established relationships with these native tribes that we collaborate on with this bison herd up in our mountain parks. He has been working on this for, I don't know, his whole career, as far as I know, to build these relationships. And it's very personal. And that's not something you can put a price on, but I think a lot of Denverites are proud of. And so if he walks out the door, I honestly don't know if there's another person that these people that work for these tribal organizations would trust in Denver to do this same work.
Yeah, the way I know Scott is that he used to be the person that I could connect with and outside organizations could connect with for help with basically connecting porta potties at homeless encampments or the city or various shower trucks and things like that. And he was the person that could help sort of cut through the bureaucratic morass and help with that. When you talk about soft skills, you also brought up the word trust. And I think that's another way in which government is really different than a private company. If people in our city agencies have relationships throughout the city, those relationships are extremely important. And if the person that you're used to dealing with in a city agency is suddenly gone, we're experiencing plummeting trust in government. That's a crisis equal to the budget crisis. And I don't think that what's happening this week is doing anything to help that, unfortunately.
What I worry about, speaking of the trust, is, and I don't know, I haven't seen anyone talking about this so far, but I think about the mayor, he thinks about himself as an entrepreneur, from this startup world. I don't know where he gets these ideas, but when I hear those people talk about layoffs, some of the conventional wisdom is you cut deeper than you think you have to. You go harder than you think you have to, so the next round of layoffs don't have to be as bad.
But in government, if you cut further than you think you have to, you're not getting those people back and that talent back. The harm of that, I think, is pretty extreme. I just don't view workers as fungible, I guess, in that way. And that's also, my background. I'm an employment attorney. I represented employees for my whole career. So I'm also really sensitive to the social impacts. When someone loses a job, it just ripples out, especially in this economy. Everybody's paycheck to paycheck right now. And so that's the other thing that keeps me up at night, is that there's just so much uncertainty, instability, and real lack of security and safety for families in the city. And so we have to think of our employees in that context, right? Like they're also residents in the metro area that are being left reeling right now. So I want to return to one thing about the timing of this, which is that now seeing that it's only this small number of people, which again, I'm glad about that. That is a relief. And I give the mayor's administration credit that it's a smaller number. Interestingly, the only reason we thought it would be a bigger number was because they said it would be, but I'm very glad it's a smaller number. But then why right now, and why not as part of the budget process, which is done in partnership with City Council, and which is where we jointly decide what the priorities of the city should be and where we should spend our money, which is hard. It's the hardest part of this job. I'm sure it's one of the hardest parts of the mayor and the agency's job, because that's what drives everything else. So by making the decision to permanently cut all of these vacant positions and laying folks off right before the budget, you've essentially driven what would otherwise have been budgetary decisions. Because if there's no one left to run certain programs, and we won't know until tomorrow, again, who's been cut, then those programs can't be restored through the budget. And if a position has been permanently eliminated from the books, instead of just continuing to be held vacant, which is the same cost savings, then City Council can't choose to refund that position. That position's gone, and we can't create position through the budget. So that's the other piece of it that I just don't love.
Because you're saying this should be council's role. This is your power as council. This is a check you have on a policy decision you're saying that the mayor's making through these layoffs.
Yeah, it's our job too. And it's interesting to me, given the weight of all of this, it's hard for me to understand the preference to go it alone versus the preference for governing with the other people that were elected to do the hard things in the city.
This is Mayor Mike, though. We know him. You know him better than the rest of us. We know he loves to choose his spots. He loves to go at the issues he thinks he has an answer for and pursue them relentlessly. He doesn't want to hear other people's opinions when he thinks he's right.
I don't really have a comment on that.
This episode is brought to you by Denver Health. Join Denver Health for an exclusive exhibit, Stories in Black and White. This powerful display shares real stories of people affected by the opioid crisis and overdose epidemic. Stories of hope, struggle, loss, healing, courage, and change. Because the truth is, substance use disorders don't discriminate. They touch people from every walk of life. And by listening, we can reduce stigma and open the door to support. Okay, so I'm looking at their site. I'm seeing some examples of these stories. These look like really personal, serious stories of people that overcame some really hard challenges. Yeah, this person, Kitty, thanks to Denver Health, I'm now in recovery. And for the first time in a long time, I feel hope. The crippling hopelessness that came with my addiction is no longer part of my daily life. Wow. You can experience the exhibit for yourself on Monday, September 1st at Civic Center Park, or Thursday, September 4th at the Central Public Library. For full details, visit denverhealth.org/blackandwhite. This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center. And Olivia, I gotta tell you, I've been looking forward to this one because I love the way they write their copy like it's a trailer for a movie. In a world, 7 strangers, 1 remote country house, a snowstorm, and then somebody turns up dead. The Mousetrap, a really great play that you should see, and it's very cool that the Arvada Center is doing it. I've seen it a couple of times. I loved it both times. And they're doing it September 5th through October 12th at the Arvada Center. The Arvada Center produces award-winning theater right here in our community, featuring Colorado actors, directors, and designers. See this iconic and Paul-approved murder mystery play right in your backyard at the Arvada Center. See for yourself why Agatha Christie's ingenious detective story is the longest-running play in the world. Is that actually true? What about Shakespeare? The Mousetrap play, wikipedia.com. It ran from 1952 on London's West End until the March 16th, 2020, and then had to stop because of the pandemic. That's like, how many years is that? That's so long. Good for them. The tickets are available now at arvatacenter.org. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on from layoffs. There's a bunch of other stuff we want to hit. You mentioned the budget process, I know, is due next month. I mean, this general overall overarching problem that the city's dealing with of costs going up, revenues not going up as high as we expected, leading to this shortfall. What kind of talk are we hearing about? Are we talking about cutting costs? Are we talking about increasing revenue? Where do you think the energy is going to be?
I have preferred for a long time and said it a lot, and am trying to act on this more personally with the tools that I do have in my job, that we need to be thinking about revenue. And I'll say a little bit more about what I mean by that. Apparently, these layoffs and cutting of vacant positions from the roles is about $100 million of savings. I will say that this sort of $200 million number, it's based on projections. We last heard it last spring. I'm going to be pretty interested to see how those projections are looking now. And these are projections that are done by the Department of Finance. I haven't seen like a updated version of that since spring. So on the revenue side of things, revenue is hard in Denver, right? Because we can't do different classes of property taxation because of Tabor. So for example, you might think we could tax extremely large commercial property holders at a slightly higher property tax rate than homeowners. No, we can't do that. That's off the table. Any other form of taxation we want to do has to go to the ballot. So things like Denver doesn't tax a lot of commonly taxed items. We could have an argument about whether these taxes are a good or a bad idea because they tend to be a little bit regressive. But things like a cigarette tax, a sugary beverage tax, we don't do a lot of that. All those things would have to go to the ballot. So that basically leaves you in the world of thinking about fees, which is essentially like the government being able to charge, not so much for like, I don't like to think of it in that like exchange kind of way, like charging people a fee for services, because that's supposed to be what your taxes pay for. But more like charging fees for either behavior that we want to disincentivize, or for things where someone's taxes really are not like covering their weight. And so an example of this, like Uber and Lyft are running vehicles on our roads all day. They increase car circulation quite a bit. They increase pollution. Should we be charging them a fee for wear and tear and pollution? Like there's certain harms to our city right now, especially if you think about climate change, that I don't think we're adequately reflecting. And so that's one area that I'm thinking quite a bit about.
That's an interesting idea. Uber and Lyft, but not all cars?
Well, Uber and Lyft are making a profit from running a much larger number of cars than would otherwise be on the road. So I think it's justifiable to look at them as they're essentially...
I feel like you could say that about any car maker, any car or anything.
Or fleet companies. True, but individual residents of the city are also paying, like, again, their property tax and all of that, which is meant to support their share of streets, right?
Okay. Interesting idea. Well,
I mean, that's like, I have a whole list of these, right? So,
of potential fees that you want to put forward. You think that's the best one?
But I'm looking for the area where we're charging like corporations that are like veering into bad actor realms, or sort of not internalizing their externalities properly, to be clear.
Yeah.
I get to say something really happy. Everyone should know this. We actually have an alternative in Denver. It's pretty new. It's called the Drivers Co-op. It is an app-based, driver-owned rideshare company. Mm-hmm. You can download their app, and they finally got access to the airport, which they didn't used to have. So now you can use them exactly the way you use Uber and Lyft. So I have a couple recommendations. Download the app. I use it. Oftentimes you get a driver right away. If you don't, get an Uber and a Lyft and then tell your driver to join the co-op. So if Uber and Lyft left Denver, we'd be fine. We have a driver-owned alternative that honestly is socially better in every way. So lucky us.
I just tried their, I saw that they had relaunched, and I need to download the app again.
Yeah, they unfortunately...
It was not, I mean, the big companies, they got some things they do better.
Yeah, well, their tech is their secret sauce, right?
Okay, another issue, actually kind of on the similar topic. I want to talk about AI, because the mayor's big conference, his AI conference, is at the end of the month.
Man, you and my senior policy aides.
I know.
I want to talk about AI.
Every guy that has my skin complexion seems to be interested in this topic for some reason. But so he's doing his conference in a couple of weeks. And then the other way it came up was around this nuclear reactor at DIA idea that you all were talking about on council recently. You're rolling your eyes again. So I think this is a good topic. Let's get into it.
That was not a dismissive eye roll. That was oh, good Lord, now I have to learn about nuclear eye roll.
Oh, really?
Just
Okay.
for
Were you
transparency's
interested
sake.
in the study? Because the whole proposal was to do a study on potentially a nuclear reactor at the airport, right? Like, would you be interested in that? $1.25 million is what the proposal was.
You know, we have to start getting real about our energy future somehow. I'm never against studying anything. I'll put it that way.
Okay. And how did you feel about the justification of like potentially building data centers out there for AI?
I mean, data centers are bad news, generally speaking. In addition to their energy usage, they use a huge amount of water as well for cooling. And it's just fueling. I mean, I actually don't think AI is beneficial as currently constructed and regulated either. So I'm not a very big fan of leaning hard into that industry. I would prefer that we do the opposite. You know, we have energy needs already, right? Like that are extremely pressing. So until we've phased out all of our dirty energy, I don't really feel like we should be adding these energy hogs.
So there's no part of you that's like, and I know you're progressive, but there's no part of you that's like, ooh, these AI companies, you know, all that money they're making, that could be tax revenue coming to Denver. We should be trying to lure them.
The kind of taxes that we charge are a little hard to charge on that kind of thing. That is on my mind, but I don't want to lure them here for tax revenue. Like, we should be taxing
jobs.
Well, they don't employ that many people actually, because they're just basically these big warehouses. They have maybe, a couple dozen employees is all. So they're not drivers of jobs really. They do bring in revenue because of all the equipment purchases, as I understand it. So just essentially buying the server banks and the computers and all of that, there's some sales tax revenue on that. But we're trapped in this loop. Like, we shouldn't be creating our world based on like generating taxable economic activity if that activity isn't also good for us. I mean, we can't just like eat all of our energy in order to get sales tax. I don't really think that's a great plan.
I don't know, because I feel like I know that some of those words are scary, like general economic activity. I feel like the economics wouldn't work if people weren't using these products.
Right. That's true. But I mean, they're also like the way that AI and all of these tools are marketed to us and sort of foisted upon us is not exactly like free choice, you know, like I don't exactly think that we're all trying to live our best life talking to ChatGPT.
Yeah, no,
and that's not
true.
That wouldn't be my preference for my children's future, to be like alone in their room talking to a robot. And I'm really interested in hearing people's uses of it, but it's where it starts to replace like social interaction that I get super freaked out.
Honestly, I don't know. That part of it doesn't bother me. But what I think bothers me is like what people don't remember from the movie Her, where Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with the AI. She leaves him at the end. She leaves him and goes off to explore the galaxy. Like, they're going to get bored of us. Don't fall in love with a robot. They'll let you down.
Do you read that comic, Questionable Content?
No, what's this?
It's a long-running, very good-hearted, sweet web comic about a future world that's populated by both humans and AIs, but it's like super wholesome. Like, we all get along. The AIs have become very human. They like love us. I would love that future, but nice. I don't exactly know if that's where we're cruising towards.
I mean, we can choose. We get to choose. You get to choose on council.
Dude, Sam, what's his bucket gets to choose.
Mr. Like, Altman.
Yeah, like they're programming these things to make them money, right? And so they're not for us. Mm-hmm. They're not for us.
I think, all right, we got to move on. We got to talk about a huge issue that I know you all have been discussing like 6 months now, which is the Salvation Army. This is one of the
2 years, actually.
2 years. I mean, probably longer, honestly. I just am not aware of it. But this is one of the city's biggest homeless services providers. And council has been increasingly, I would say, questioning the contracts that they have with the city. They're a key partner in the mayor's work to, end unsheltered homelessness. That's his goal for his first term. But the latest is that Salvation Army preemptively said they're going to allow their contracts to run 3 shelter spaces expire to, quote, ensure our financial stability. So they're not even letting it go to you all to talk about canceling it. They're saying we don't want to extend it. Well, tell me what's up. Tell me what's happening.
Well, so in fact, the housing department put those contracts out for RFP several months ago and chose new providers.
Oh, really?
So that's a little bit of, a little disingenuous, I guess, by Salvation Army.
For them to say we need to take care of our own
Well, right.
backyard.
I don't know if they've been notified yet of non-selection, and I don't yet know who the new providers are, but I know that these contracts went out to RFP quite some time ago, and to a request for proposals looking for potential new providers, which in and of itself is a signal to Salvation Army, like the city is not happy with your work.
Trying to move on.
That was like end of last year, I think, or January. So it's been a while. And then luckily some other providers stepped up and made bids to run those spaces.
Well, that's good news. One of my questions was going to be, because I know they're such a big player, Salvation Army, is there enough? Are there people that could step up? And it sounds like absolutely.
There are providers in place. I don't yet know who they are, but there are other providers that either have been or will be notified of their selection and who did step up to the plate.
Something I heard from, I was talking to actually someone who happens to work in this world, the homeless services world. And they were like, I think this story is being misinterpreted. This is not like a Salvation Army versus the city story. This is a council versus the mayor story, because the contracts that the Salvation Army has with the city, those are the mayor's contracts. They're working on his project. And then you all are the check on what he wants to do with Salvation Army. Do you agree with that premise?
I think it's a mix of things. I mean, I do have to give a huge amount of credit to Councilwoman Lewis. Two of those three shelters are in her district, obviously on the Quebec Strait corridor, and they are the all-in Mile High non-congregate shelters. And then in addition, there's the non-congregate family shelter in Council Pro Tem Romero Campbell's district. So in a sense, I think the council has definitely pushed really, really hard to get the administration to put these things out to RFP and to do the work of trying to support some of the smaller providers to the point where they could take on these bigger contracts and dig in and do that. And so I think it's probably true that if we hadn't pushed that really hard, it may not have happened. But I also don't think that the housing department disagrees about this. And I mean, keep in mind, there was a horrific sexual assault that happened in one of these shelters that happened because the Salvation Army had not properly screened their employees, and someone got hired who should never have been working around vulnerable people. And what happened was intensely traumatic for the person that it happened to and for people who were listening in nearby rooms. I mean, it was awful. And that's not the only sort of example of things happening on TSA's watch. I also think that there's a little bit of a philosophical push and pull in the world of homeless services provision about, is it sort of charity, and to what degree do you have to be trauma informed? I've spent a lot of time over these last months and years, along with other council members, talking to a variety of past employees of Salvation Army in Denver, current employees, guests of shelters, and just trying to really get my arms around, because you don't want to take any single person's point of view, because in these spaces, the work is really hard. The experiences people are having at a shelter, it's not like most people go into shelter and are just having a great time. You're there because you're having a really tough time in your life. And so you have to be super careful and take with a grain of salt and think hard about the feedback. But having talked to many, many people, I feel confident that there are other providers that do a much better job of being trauma informed, staffing spaces appropriately, and sort of coming from the work philosophically the way we would want as a city.
Sarah Parody, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love it here.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell Scott Gilmore about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. And hey, if you love the show, support it. You can help keep us going strong and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Denver neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you then.